meet today. Thank you. And pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome anyone here who identifies as a First Nations person. I also acknowledge that the lands and waterways have always been places of cultural, spiritual and educational significance. So thank you all for turning up. We have 3 presenters today who are going to present on the topic just in time big issue practice sharing. So our first presenter probably needs no introduction. He's been to a number of AusPlats, John Malouf, and he's going to talk to us on 3 assignments resistant to AI. And the big issue he's talking about is designing assessments in the era of generative AI. So John, over to you. You can just, as we've already said, you can just screen share for us.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything to share on my screen. I'm the whole show in my brief episode here. I'm in Armidale at the University of New England. I'm going to talk about AI-resistant assignments. These are mostly relevant to distance students because if we have students in the classroom with us, we can do various things. We have more options then, but I rarely have that option, have that situation. So I've developed some, for one reason or another, 3 different types of assignments that are somewhat resistant or fairly resistant to AI. The first assignment is in Psych 314, behavior modification. It requires students to first propose a behavior change project they're going to do on themselves or on someone else. They have to send me a proposal up to 500 words. I comment on that, usually tell them to change this or add this or that. And part of what I'm doing there is I'm fixing them then to make it somewhat resistant to AI, but mostly I'm trying to help them succeed in their behavior change project. It does fix what they need to do though. So they then do their assignment and they turn in a report, 1,250 word maximum, but they also have to submit the proposal with my comments on it. So that's how it's fixed. The markers will look at both what they proposed and what I said about it, and then look at what they actually did in their report. So that is resistant because in part it has phases to it. And there's content from me, and there's certainly content from the unit, from the textbook, but there's also specific content from me that they've got to do something with. So because it comes in phases with some feedback from me, that makes it resistant to them just making up something and having AI write about it in their final report. The second assignment is also for the same unit, Psych 314, Behavior Modification. In this assignment, students create a video of 3 to 8 minutes and where they explain how to change some behavior using behavior mod principles. And here I'm much broader in what I allow them to do. For instance, in this, I would allow them to talk about weight control, which I don't allow them to do a project on because it's too short a period for weight control. It's almost always going to fail in the long run. When finals time comes, they start eating. So the whole thing falls apart. So, but the second one is broader, can include exercise or weight control or whatever they want that's a behavior. And so they do this video, and then we mark the video and we take off points if they read. So I don't want them to read. I want them to get in the practice of just speaking to a group of people, which is what I'm doing now, although I have notes and they can have notes too. So that's the second assignment, which is hard. Anything with video or in person is very hard for AI to do. The third assignment is in Psych 423, which we call Professional Practice 2, and it requires students to complete a role play of 25 to 30 minutes in which they're a counselor. So we build them up to that during the intensive school. This is all being done online because they're not in person. And so they have to do this role play. And because it's video, it's oral, there just isn't much room at all for AI and that to take over, to submit for them. So the 3 assignments, 2 of them are in essence video. The third one is particularly resistant. The second one that I talked about where they explain how to change something, they could get a script for that from AI. And they could read it. Oh, they're going to lose some points for that, but I hope they won't do it. It's just somewhat resistant. They still have to give a video presentation. So that part of it is still there. AI can't do that for them. And the first one where they're doing actual behavior change project, that also has resistant elements because of the phases. So these are 3 different types of projects or assignments, assessments that students do that I think are relatively resistant to AI involvement without, I mean, I always tell them not to use AI, but these are resistant, makes it hard for them to use AI. The marking is something to think about for any of these. If you want to use one, is it takes some marking time to videos, depends on what standards you use and rubrics and things like that. But marking can take some time, and that's just the way it goes for all of these. And I think I do have markers for all of these assignments. So far, we'll see what happens next year, but so far there's money for that. So they are resistant. They're not perfectly resistant. Some of them particularly could have elements of AI helping them. I don't know that I'm completely against that. It's not that I hate AI. I just want to make sure they learn something and they demonstrate their learning. Now, these are just 3 examples of AI-resistant assignments. There are other ways to do AI-resistant, and I know that because I looked them up. And how did I look them up? I asked AI. I went into a AI software called Perplexity that another academic was telling me about just recently. Oh, I see a nod. You like Perplexity. This other academic just loves Perplexity. And I asked that question, how do you create assignments for students that are resistant to AI? And I will put that, let me try it, in case you're wanting. It comes out pretty well. I just put that in the chat. So you can see that there is overlap with what I'm talking about with oral assignments, certainly, and with phased assignments where they give a proposal and then they have to carry it out. That's much more complicated for students to use AI. If they can for that, then they deserve some credit because they're pretty clever. They've really thought about this in advance. They're not doing it at the last minute because
I'll just interrupt you for a second. There's a little arrow in the bottom right corner of the chat window. Just make sure you've clicked on that arrow too.
Oh, I haven't actually put it in there, huh?
Okay, thank you. I was.
Is it there now?
No, not yet.
I've clicked it a few times. Do you see anything in chat?
No.
No.
Not yet, no.
John, can you make sure that the chat window says to everyone and not a specific name?
It says it's to everyone.
Okay.
Yes, and I've clicked on that little blue arrow, which
Good.
I didn't
Yeah.
know about. But it's still not showing up, huh?
Not at this point. So, yeah, we could.
Are you clicking on the blue arrow that says everyone with the down arrow, or are you clicking in the lower right-hand corner?
I'm clicking in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it send chat to everyone, but it's just not going in for whatever reason. Well, that's the best. That's technology for you. Can help you or hurt you.
Yep.
I see it in chat, but it's not being transmitted, I guess.
Okay. We'll find a way to distribute that, and perhaps
Okay.
when your bit's over, if you could just email me and I'll copy it and put it up into chat.
Okay, I can send it that way.
Yeah.
That's all I've wanted to say about it. I'll take any questions or comments. Nope, that's it then.
Phoebe's got a comment, John?
Hi,
Oh,
John.
okay. Go ahead and
Thanks
speak
for,
up.
hello. Thanks for sharing. I was just wondering if you're worried at all about, and actually, I don't think it is a worry yet, but probably in not too long, with video presentations, AI can actually create an avatar and it will look like the students presenting, but it won't actually be them.
I've not heard of that, so that's something to think. That wouldn't work in the counseling because it has to be interactive. At some point, it might work in counseling, and then many of us will be out of business, is what I suspect. As far as explaining how to use some psychological principles to change a behavior, that I could see happening. The avatar would have to be pretty realistic looking like a person. Not that I or my markers would know what the person looks like. So it doesn't have to look like that person exactly, but it has to look like a human being. And then it has
I will
to
say, John,
meet
that
all the other
sometimes you can
criteria.
see in the eyes, you can see that it's not a real person because of the uncanny valley. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen anyone, I haven't seen that in a test version. So if I knew about that, I might have used that tonight. Perhaps the software could have put this chat comment in there effectively, which I was unable to do.
You kind
Thank
of
you for mentioning that to me. That's something that could happen. That can't happen probably in a classroom presentation. I've done those long ago.
yeah, I think we're heading in that direction. Yeah, so certainly there are tools out there already which can create realistic looking video clips and avatars, and unfortunately it's being used for bad rather than good in many cases, with deep fakes of various kinds of things happening that are both dangerous and wrong. So it really is already in a realm where people can create those kinds of videos, but it's intensive in terms of taking a bit of effort and time, and the student may not. I guess the motivation to do that would have to be to avoid personally having to make a video of themselves. So I'm just not quite sure why someone would want to create a fake of themselves unless they were really bad or really anxious or something about making the video.
Yes, I see that because about 20% of my students won't even submit a video. They lose the 5%, and that's just social anxiety, I believe, for most of them. But I could see also with international students, if they're not very facile in English, they might want to create. So I just don't get that. I don't get the international students where I am. I do get the socially anxious students. So if they cotton on to this idea of having a digital creation of them give the presentation, they may do it. And who knows, that may serve them reasonably well in life. I don't know how far a person can go with that, but might go far.
And there's another question from Laura, John.
Okay, Laura.
Hi, John. I just have a question about your first assignment, which is the written proposal and the report. What's stopping a student from making up their behavior change strategy, then putting any comments that they've received from you into Gen AI and asking Gen AI to fix their report based on the information that you've told them to include?
Yes, they could do that. It's rather awkward with Moodle because my comments don't merge well with what they said, but they could retype my comments. That will take a little more work into, say, a Word document, and then say include all this in there. Some of my comments refer them to other material I put on the unit, but they could also then, I guess, copy that material, the suggestions about what to do about substance abuse and so on, standard suggestions I make about that. So they could copy that in there. And they'd have to think well in advance, though. They'd have to go through, I guess not. I guess they could submit a proposal, and this they could do near the last minute for doing. And if you ever used artificial intelligence, it's fast. It's very fast. I know that because I've tested some of my online quiz items, and it will give me the correct answer within less than a second. It's truly amazing. So it's very hard to do online quiz now because I know that any student who wants to cheat can get 100%. I've not seen 100% on them yet because either they have ethics or they just don't know. They haven't tried it. That's a good point. That students are, if they're clever enough to cheat well, they're pretty clever. They may not need to cheat. It's certainly to their advantage and their career advantage to actually do the assignment, and it may not be that much more work. However, if there's some reason for them, a strong reason for them not to do it, such as they have social phobia, which is very, very common, or they just don't speak clearly and they feel whatever embarrassed about that. That I could see driving them forward.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Laura, for your questions. I don't think AI is an easy topic. There's a lot to talk about. And that's a good segue for Esther. So Esther is talking to us tonight about incorporating AI literacy and cultural awareness in research training for educational and developmental psychology students at the master's level. And her big issue is how to incorporate cultural awareness and AI literacy in research training for psychology students. So over to you, Esther. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya. I'll try and share my slides, see if that works. Okay, what do people see? Is it my slides or my notes?
We can see your slides at the moment.
It's your slides,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, excellent. So let me see where to put the windows for people. Okay, cool. All right. So I'll make a start. Thank you all for inviting me to speak at this roundtable. So I'll say a few things. First of all, if you looked at the, I found in the 2021 APS in the US has identified a few grand challenges for psychology in the coming years. These are globalization and diversity, research integrity and applicability, collaboration across fields and disciplines. So today I'm going to talk about how I try to address some of these challenges through incorporating AI literacy and cultural awareness in teaching a research methods subject. Through my presentation, what I will show you is that with an emphasis on diversity of perspectives and critical thinking about the strengths and limitations of different research methods, the subject offers a useful and relevant setting for students to think about some of the grand challenges in psychology. Okay. Just before I go on, I want to also acknowledge the land on which I work, learn and live belongs to the Wurundjeri people. I'm in Melbourne, and I appreciate the critical voice that Indigenous people offer in our understanding of the world, including research methodology. So a bit about me, I'm currently a part-time lecturer in the program. I've done a master's and a PhD in the area, and I'm a registered psychologist and am endorsed in the area of practice. I've been teaching the research methods subject at the master's level since 2021, and my current research involves developing an assessment tool in the area of epistemic cognition and teacher noticing research using multimodal learning analytics and AI tools. Now, even though I'm not a computer scientist, I find that my statistics training in psychology has been very useful to understand how AI works. And this is something that I emphasize with my students in the subject. Because I don't have a lot of time, I'll give some brief background about the subject, the elements and emphases in the subject that are relevant to AI literacy and cultural awareness, and some student feedback. Feel free to ask me any questions about the subject at the end or after the session. So students take this subject in the first year of their 2-year master's degree. And it's a fairly small cohort. We're talking about between 20 to 30 students. And these are the learning objectives, which include the ability to evaluate research literature, select and use appropriate data analysis techniques, and plan an independent inquiry. There's an assignment that corresponds to each learning objective, and John talked about his assignments. But for our subject, we're not formally assessing the students for AI literacy and cultural awareness at this stage, so I won't go into the assignments in my presentation. So this is the subject outline for the 12-week semester. What I start off with in the first 4 weeks is to cover the theoretical grounding of research, talking about different research paradigms, and then move to cover quantitative and qualitative research methods and research syntheses. The quantitative methods component is mainly a refresher, as all students would have already completed 4 years of psychology studies before entering the master's program. Although I know that for some students, there could be quite a few years gap before they started the program. And then by the time we reach week 10, students will have a good grasp of quantitative and qualitative methods. And that's when I throw into the mix by talking about big data and AI and cross-cultural studies in week 11. But there are certain conversations and ideas that are woven in throughout the whole subject. The main thing that I try to do is to connect research and psychological practice. Often students think research is a separate thing that people do as academics, and I try to broaden the concept of research so that students can see what they learn in other subjects in the master's program, like counseling, behavioral observation, assessment are all part of research skills. Throughout the subject, I particularly emphasize the value and importance of understanding diverse perspectives and the ability to juxtapose nomothetic and idiographic perspectives in psychology, where nomothetic can be associated with a quantitative approach and idiographic with a qualitative approach. In the first class, I show students this X post or Twitter post, and then get students to talk about what this person was trying to say. I'll give you a bit of time to think about this image and your thoughts about it. Feel free to put your thoughts or comments in chat if you like. Nice, thank you. So one distinction that the students commonly make is the difference between what I call holism and reductionism. You can take all of the leaves off from a tree branch and count the leaves and the branches and add them up, but it's no longer the tree branch that we know of. So this post helps me to emphasize that in the subject, students will learn about the importance of quantification as a form of knowing, but will also recognize that quantification is only one way of knowing and meaning making. And from there, I focus on getting students to learn about different research methods and the underpinning paradigms, and get students to discuss what constitutes quality research according to different paradigms, and the strengths and limitations of different research methods. This is a Padlet that I get students to complete in small groups in week 10 about the strengths and limitations of quantitative and qualitative research methods. This provides the pretext for me to introduce mixed methods research designs to the students. But I also highlight that ultimately these methods can only offer us a partial view of the world, as human systems are much more complex. I also put research methods in social historical context, where we see different methods being developed to try to address the limitations of other methods. And Artificial intelligence is part of our strive to study human conditions in more complex ways. For AI literacy, I give students some basic description of machine learning and neural networks using the definition of AI as automation based on associations. I also highlight its strengths and limitations, particularly biases. Here, for example, I talk about the algorithmic biases that can happen with AI models. Here, I show students an example of generative AI output where we can clearly see some cultural biases that are hidden. So just to explain, what I've put in the prompt there in ChatGPT is give me a brief history of art. And what is shown there, it's reasonable kind of accounts, it seems. But when I ask it to show me, give me a brief history, brief global history of art, what I find is that it actually inserted a lot more information about African or Australian context, whereas the previous prompt only provide me a very Eurocentric view of art history, for example. So that's a very clear kind of hidden biases you wouldn't know until you, you wouldn't know the biases until you actually look for it. In week 11, I take a similar approach to cross-cultural studies where I discuss their assumptions, strengths, and limitations. Cross-cultural studies are particularly interesting to talk about in terms of the nomothetic and ideographic distinction because students can generally see the problems of generalizing cultures, but also the value of recognizing patterns and self-identifying with a particular culture. So these conversations lead to current recommendations for best practice in research, particularly for working with First Nations peoples and communities. This includes co-design research, which is advocated to address the power imbalance that has historically been in place in social science research. Now, I can't cover everything in a 12-week subject, so my aim is to sensitize students to some existing research biases and for them to look out for some new or emerging research directions. The feedback from students in the subject is generally positive. I'm quite happy with this, considering a lot of students often do not like or are anxious about stats or research methods. In terms of qualitative feedback, students generally value the focus on paradigms and qualitative approaches and the discussion about power relations, which they say are not often covered in undergrad years. Some find the discussion about culture particularly interesting and stimulating. Now, our students come from different undergrad psych degrees, some from overseas, some from many years back. So it's difficult to say how much these perspectives reflect current psychology teaching. But overall, students seem to find my approach to teaching research methods quite novel to them, while also relevant. And just in case anyone is interested, I haven't been able to fit this into my subject currently, but if you're focusing on teaching quantitative methods, you may be interested in this book by Indigenous authors Maggie Walter and Kit Anderson about quantitative methods from an Indigenous perspective. There's also a more recent article about their views. And for AI literacy, the US Department of Education has published a very insightful report about people's concerns and aspirations for AI in education. There are some useful considerations and recommendations there that I find also useful for the Australian context. So in closing, an emphasis on diversity of perspectives and critical thinking about research methods. Research coursework subjects offer a useful setting for psychology students to learn about AI literacy and cultural awareness, which addresses some of the grand challenges in psychology. So this is my take on teaching the research methods subject for our master's students. I very much would like to hear how other people have prepared their students for future technology and discourse about complex social cultural issues in their teaching. So please feel free to share your practice. These are my references. I'm happy to share my slides after the session for those who are interested. And if you have any further thoughts, questions, or suggestions, also feel free to email me. So that's my presentation.
Thank you, Esther. We'll open it up to questions. So if you'd like to stop sharing so we can see our gallery of rogues here. So does anyone have any questions or feedback for Esther? Jackie?
Thanks, Esther. That was really very interesting. My strength is not in research methods, but as you were talking, it seemed to me that much of the material would be suitable to, I guess, help undergraduate students meet the ECOOP category 2 research methodologies and methods. It just seemed to speak to it entirely. So
Yeah, I recognize the connection because I didn't attend the session the last round, the last gathering, but yeah, I did watch a recording, and yeah, it does look like it does speak to it. So yeah, I was quite excited to see that.
yeah, so do you think we should be bringing more of this into the undergraduate, from what you're talking about, masters, at least introducing them to some of those very important concepts?
Thanks for the feedback.
Thank you.
I really liked your presentation, Esther. I've taught honours research approaches, and I really like the way you've set out the course and the topics that you've got. I think that would be really great for honours level as well. I think, in many universities, qualitative research was a bit of a dirty word. And I think we're getting better at that, but oftentimes students don't get the opportunity to really understand qualitative research until honours or masters or even PhD level.
Yeah. I also noticed there's often a lot of mistrust distrust, sorry, about qualitative methods as well. And so talking about what does research quality look like from that perspective has been useful, I think, for the students.
Yeah, and realising and recognising that qualitative methods is just as robust as quant, it's just different.
I was just going to say thank you as well. Really appreciated that. And I hadn't been aware of some of the areas and authors that you were referring to around the Indigenous perspectives. So APAC will revise its standards next year. It's a big project coming up for 2025. And of course, part of that will be looking at the foundational competencies for undergrad and then other levels, level 2, 3 and 4, the honours through to postgrad. But it's worth thinking ahead a bit about, what kind of methodologies and methods we might want to see in an undergrad sequence and what should be in the standards in the future. So I think you've just given us a glimpse of what we might, perhaps want to advocate for. And there'll be opportunity for everyone to contribute to what the new standards will ultimately look like. And obviously the thing that's also hit in the last week is CIBA has released the next set of professional competency standards, which will apply from the 1st of December next year. So the draft and early release of those came out. So it's worth looking at the kinds of methods and methodologies that are embedded in the sort of the professional competency standards now that CIBA's put out as well. So I think it's intersecting with other things that are happening. Jackie already referring to international competencies for undergraduates like the ECOOP ones, which have been circulated and been around for a little while. So there's a fair bit of kind of happening in that space with a lot of work to happen in 2025. So I think what you've just done is give us some really good ideas there.
Oh, I'm pleased. Thank you. Because it's often I don't know what people, I haven't attended every single psych courses in Australia, so it's good to hear from you in terms of how relevant or this could be.
Thank you, Esther. So I'm just going to welcome now Trisha and Tash, I think is there, and they're going to be discussing building reflexivity via reflective writing practice for psychology undergraduates and their big issue is supporting development of reflexivity skills in psychology undergraduates. So I'll throw it over to them.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Is the sound working okay? Okay, the sound is, and let's see if we can actually get the PowerPoint show to work as well. Okay, so has that come up okay now? You can see the PowerPoint presentation? Yep, great, okay. All right, yeah, so thanks for having us along as well. We're really excited to get to talk with you about the first year unit, essentially it is, that we've been a part of developing and part of a bigger team. I'd just like to also open, has that changed slides now as well, just so? Yep, great, okay. To the acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Macquarie University land, the Wallumattagal clan of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the Dreamtime. We pay our respects to elders past and present. I'm currently on Darug country. I also grew up on Darug country, and so I'd just like to also acknowledge Auntie Janice Kennedy and Auntie Linda McDonald, two elders in my community who really emphasised to me the importance of connectedness to country, and then through connectedness to country, how we're connected to each other. It influences how I work. I'm also a registered psychologist like Esther, and then a lecturer at Macquarie Uni. I joined the team in November of last year, that was. In terms of what we'll have a little talk about, so having a look at reflection and reflexivity, and it's actually connecting to those new ARPRA competencies actually, that I've got some slides which we can have a little bit of a look at for how they conceptualise those things. Then having a look at the first year unit that we've developed, the reflective writing practices and how we're conceiving of those as being integrated into the content. And then Tash will talk us through the development for one of the modules that are a part of this unit as well, and what was done in that. In coming to work at Macquarie, one of the themes that was repeated, so I teach on both undergrad and postgrad, and it's actually Joe Paparo, who's also on the call here today, who introduced, I think, this idea of self-reflective learning to me, self-directed learning rather. So the sense that in our delivery of adult education, what we're encouraging is building skills in understanding where we are or where the student candidates are, and then where do they need to be and want to get to in terms of their goals. You can see here on the model that I've got from Zimmerman and Nowland that self-reflection is included as a part of that. And so in starting to think about how we're including reflective practices, which have been proposed as AI proof, although in having run this unit for one semester already, we could bring some question to how AI proof reflection actually is. But we've integrated then as well. In first year, we're really thinking about self-awareness as focus, and particularly in this unit, psychology, finding your foundations in future, it's called. It's focused on personal values, starting to connect those, how students are thinking about entering into professional worlds, and professional worlds beyond psychology is a really big focus in this unit as well. In second year, the reflective writing that is incorporated tends to be much more in the old units that are delivered along the lines of the scientist practitioner model. In terms of coming to learn about what a particular area is, health and wellbeing is one unit that I can think of in second year where there's reflective writing incorporated in that. And then in third year, we're actually planning to integrate community perspectives as well. So the ICOOP model, I think, got mentioned a little bit before, and here it is. This will be, I think, familiar to all of you, potentially on this call as well. So we're really working to integrate that middle part, personal work in the first year units, and then out to community by the third year as well. In doing that then, even in the first year unit, we're still incorporating education about how the scientist practitioner model works. There are no exams in this unit, but there is an individual writing summary, and then there's building communication skills through participating in group presentation development as well as them actually completing reflective writing. And the reflective writing is about the different topic areas that you'll see here, and you'll see listed on our weeks when I get to that slide in just a minute. Before I get to that though as well, just in terms of this thinking about reflective writing and how we're thinking about this, connecting to the ARPRA competencies that came out just last week. So how they've shaped it in the ARPRA competencies, reflection is kind of the applied skill in the way that they've talked about it. It's involving processes, essentially, perspectives on an occasion or an event, Reflexivity, in the way that they've conceptualized it, is a broader continual process about looking at our biases, what of our personal values might have had an influence in how we're present in different situations then as well. And so how we think about this is we have started to develop the reflective writing task that students do, is how we're encouraging students, particularly in first year. We focus on them building their learning capacities as well. So there's parts of the modules which are about learning skills and study skills particularly. I encourage the students to think about that then as well, connecting to their inner experience. And Jennifer Moon, in her handbook about reflective writing practice, talked about inner experiences, everything that you've experienced and learned up until a certain point. And then you're connecting with external experience, which is then information which is either in the situation that you find yourself in, something about your experience which is very new, or what's learned in terms of the content of a course, and that can be theory as well as the findings from empirical research. In developing this unit, I've had the chance to join a team. So it's Dania and Alyssa had started the development on this content in 2023. And then Eva, Tash and myself have joined in 2024. We've delivered one semester of it in first semester, and we're currently delivering in second semester as well. In terms of what the unit's covering off, it is really working to integrate insights from psychological science. There's a paper from 2015 that was George Miller delivered to the APA in America as a president. The idea of giving psychology away. So this real notion of developing psychological literacy broadly in community by starting to share in a different way the learnings from psychology within undergraduate programs. So we worked to do that in this first year unit as well, starting to bring to the students how they could make use of what they'd otherwise learn about in psychology as they come to even be learning within a psychology degree. We also give them then as well delivery of the Study Without Stress program. So let me just get through to that in a minute before I get to there. So here's what the weeks look like in terms of the content. We integrate there, you can see stuff from the ICOOP model in terms of critical thinking skills, interpersonal skills, some focus on personal attributes, and then building towards this idea of undergraduate degrees and how they contribute to capacity as professionals in workplaces, no matter whether it's within psychology or more broadly. In there then as well, they also actually do an individual writing summary of a journal article. So they're getting some education about the scientist practitioner model and how that's otherwise worked in the production of empirical research. And then we can actually distinguish between what does academic writing look like and what does reflective writing look like, and actually within our tutorials encourage conversations about that. As I was saying, the students also have integrated in there the Study Without Stress program. There's an awesome paper by Chan and Lee, 2021, which is about reflective literacy. They talk about within that paper, they did a literature review looking at challenges around incorporating reflection in higher education. In there, they actually talk about the challenges that people will experience because reflection brings you closer to the personal as well. So that's part of the thinking in incorporating the Study Without Stress program in to give students self-monitoring techniques as well as stress handling techniques. And now I'll hand over to Tash to talk through the development of a unit, one of the modules that was there in that list that we had as well.
Thanks, Trish. Can you all hear me fine? Great. Okay. Thank you. My name's Tash, and yeah, I've been working on this unit for a while now. So I'm going to be talking about one lecture in the module, and a lot of the times these lectures are also we also have tutorials for these lectures as well. Now, in terms of the way the lectures are run, they consist of online videos and activities and knowledge tests, as well as some associated readings. The modules developed for this unit focuses on developing psychological literacy through the integration of evidence-based theory, empirical research, and activities. So we do really like to focus a lot on the activities and try and encourage that active learning process. And one of the modules that was developed by Eva and myself was a personal attributes module, and that was in one of the weeks there. And really what we did was just to encourage reflexivity and identification of student strengths. So we really did focus on positive psychology, and really we started off by defining what personal attributes are, what is and what isn't a personal attribute. We provided some examples of personal attributes, outlining some personal attributes which would be important for different tasks, like analytical thinking, and organizational skills. So just a variety of different things that we looked at, and then we really focused more on the students' strengths. So have them reflect on their strengths, as what do they consider to be their uh, you know their more sort of pronounced personal attributes. So what is considered by others is, oh, this is something that they are really good at. So we did also integrate theory as well. So a number of different theoretical models, such as goal setting theory, self-efficacy theory, to really link their attributes, and the development of identification of attributes, as well as improving their attributes. And we also taught them to create SMART goals. So goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-based goals. So we did focus on a lot of that. And we also looked at this resilience exercise through reflexivity. So we had actually, Eva and I provided some of our past experiences where we had shown resilience and some of the steps involved, and then we shared that resilience plan to the students. And then as an example, then they would actually use a template of our resilience plan, to then build their own, and then discuss with each other as well as how they would go about building their resilience plan, and in future how they would go about using that, and reflecting on what worked and what didn't work and what could be done to improve. Yeah. Think back to you, Trish.
Yeah, thank you, Tash. And that's it. I forgot to talk about the DEEP model that we've used to structure the reflective writing. But you can ask me questions about the model. I think it was on one of the slides there, but I didn't actually talk about it. But yeah, any questions, please let us know. And you can reach out to us if you got thoughts about how we could change things. It would be lovely to exchange more ideas about sort of changing undergrad psych and how we even think about the delivery of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Trisha and Tash. If you want to stop sharing so that we can see our rogues gallery again, I just want to thank you for a great presentation. When I come away from these roundtables, I'm always full of lots of ideas and wish I was back teaching, because I'm in a university role at the moment and not teaching, and it makes me miss it. So you've all energized me tonight, and now I just want to go back. I think what you've done is really good, and it sounds like it's a great transition course for students as well when they're new to the university and trying to just find their feet and understand what psychology is about. I'm wondering whether it might be the sort of course which is translatable across different disciplines, or is it more specifically towards psychology, do you think?
At the moment, probably towards psychology, but it's a really good point, Tanya, and certainly in my participation in it as well, that idea that there's very much benefit in just adult learning generally. And I know I think it was Eva had a talk with the learning and development team even as well, who'd also said similar things like, oh, this sounds like this is something that could be of benefit broadly across faculties almost as well. Yeah, so at the moment it's targeted towards psychology students, in part because as they go on to second and third year, we're kind of prompting them for what they'll be looking out for.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
Kim, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Tanya. Fantastic presentation. Apologies for my voice, I'm a little bit sick at the moment. Trisha, we use a lot of reflection in my course as well across most of our units, one of the things that we often come up against is in terms of the quality of the reflection. We find in psychology students are very scared of being judged, and not in terms of the academic, but in terms of them personally. And so when it comes to reflective pieces, they don't translate an understanding that we're judging their capacity to reflect rather than the content of the reflection. But nonetheless, the content is personal, and this person is a marker and a professional that they're going to engage with in different capacities. So I'm just wondering, like, how have you managed that? It's probably our biggest sticking point, I think, with reflection, because it means our students keep things at a very superficial level.
Yeah, I understand. And you do end up in the kind of performative realm about, what students think they should be saying in terms of their reflection. One of the things, I guess, that we've worked to do as well, Kim, is with the bigger focus, like long tutorials, is the building up of the tutor to student relationship. It's the tutors that provide reflective feedback. So as the on the overall week map that you saw there, we give formative feedback every second week. So the tutors are actually looking at the students' reflections and offering formative feedback. I don't know necessarily that we'd get very far beyond the performativity. Like, it's a really good question. In part, what we're actually encouraging as well, because I can think about myself in terms of teaching my class, it's the awareness that eventually as professionals, they'll also be in your logbooks, in whichever course you're going through, you'll be doing reflections as well. So I sort of use a parallel of, I was a lifeline counselor originally. So originally I just said, oh yeah, I'll do self-care. And eventually you learn that it's important to bring it back to yourself. So kind of use self as example. Is sort of the best that we've got. And we've got an awesome bunch of tutors who actually take delight, I think is the right thing to say, in working on the relationships and growing the students' capacity to be as self-expressive as possible.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Trisha.
Any other questions? Jackie.
Yeah. When you're undertaking the research around reflection and reflexivity, did you find that you were tapping into the allied health or medicine, nursing, and so on literature in terms of reflexivity and reflection? Because from my experience of knowing people in that field, it seems they're 100 years ahead of psychology. Why do you think that is, and why haven't we learnt to do this at both undergrad and postgrad level as well as they have at undergrad level?
Oh gosh, Jacqueline, like you're speaking to so many of my own perceptions and maybe biases even as well. So I totally appreciate what you're saying. I'm a narrative therapist by background. So social workers actually as well are also a community of folks who seem to have had a lot of focus on reflexivity for a good generation or more as well. And my PhD looked at the emphasis that we've placed on statistical methods and how the scientist practitioner model that we had in terms of the objectivity that we were wanting to provide in many ways kind of cast out our opportunities to actually presence the fact that we have subjectivities and they are of influence in the circumstances that we find ourselves within. It's really rich to think about how we might be thoughtful and respectful as well of integrating insights from nursing, from social work, from other places, care-centered professions who have been doing this work for such a long time as well. As reflexivity has become, like, it's a term that's now in the APRA, presumably it'll be a new thing in APAC as well once we get to the new APAC guidelines. It's in the ICOOP model. It's so marvelous to think about, I guess, in terms of the opportunities for us as psychologists in practice, even as well, for how we're in an evidence-based way integrating what might come from understanding reflexivity differently, even as we work with clients as well.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to psychological science. it's not just those who are heading out in practice or even in diverse career destinations from an undergraduate level or whatever, the ability to be reflexive and to know where your beliefs and attitudes come from, you know, the socio-cultural influences on that, surely is a core general professional attribute which psychological scientists should have as well. And as Esther's presentation demonstrated, just sort of knowing where our mindsets around research methodologies and methods come from, for example, that is disciplinary history and so on, would seem to be pretty fundamental in that arena as well. And if you're talking about scientist practitioner models, of course, these things are integrated. So yeah, it just seems to have been a pretty big missing piece in undergraduate psychology and for a long time, with many consequences. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What we've actually been working to do across the units that I've been involved in, I guess at Macquarie, as well as the deliberate integration of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives on every single unit as well, so that there's a clear interweaving that the students have been able to access as well, in terms of what it brings about then as well, that awareness of cultural bias into it. It'd be great to think about with what we've done so far with critical thinking. There's definitely opportunities to broaden that out in terms of the diversity and inclusion focus that's possible there as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. If there's no other questions, just thank you to Trisha and Tash for their presentation. And thank you to everyone who presented tonight, to John, to Esther, Trisha and Tash. You've just done a fantastic job.
Just a comment before we do finish, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, sure.
I thought you were wrapping it up.
No. I was going to say about what's in the chat. I was going to do that.
Well, actually, it wasn't about what's in the chat. For the next roundtable on the 13th of November, we do have 2 presenters, but there's a third space that's still open. So if this kind of discussion has stimulated something tonight, and someone would like to send us the format, you know, that we asked for, a title and brief summary, what the big issue is, and some words around that, then we still are open to having an additional presenter to the 2 that we already had for the 13th of November. So that's all. Thank you.
That's all right. And I'm just going to say Karen's popped a link in the chat just for some feedback about tonight. We really enjoy running these roundtables, but we will only run them if people think they're helpful and useful and enjoyable and all of those other things. So we need your feedback to make sure we're on the right track with our topics and for the roundtable as well. So we finished a little bit earlier than I potentially thought we would. So thank you everyone for your time, energies and effort to come along. I know it's really hard. It's a busy time of year. There's a lot happening in the higher education sector. And I know my colleagues are tired. So we appreciate you showing up, and we appreciate you sharing your best practice and doing so in a way that encourages us and makes us think about our own practice of learning and teaching and how we can improve and do better. So thank you everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.